You've probably seen the Batley Grammar School protests, Muslim parents protesting about a picture of Muhammad being shown in an RE lesson. This seems to me to be one more instalment, one small fingerpost on the dismal multicultural journey that we're all on. But I favour the separation and segregation that it represents. I think that is in our long-term interests. Now, first of all, this is not about teaching, it's not about the values of liberal democracy, and it's certainly not about pulling our socks up. This is about people. It's about incompatible populations, particularly in this case the Muslim population wanting to carve out its own separate way as a separate population. Now, what's interesting about Islam is it's like a spaghetti junction for all people with all different views about multiculturalism. You get the terror fetishists who say everything's wonderful except for terrorism, which we have to stamp out. That's kind of the Gordon Brown line. You get the multiculturalists who say everything's wonderful, they're all religions are equally great, we should welcome everyone, shouldn't single out anyone, and we shouldn't try and demonize anyone because the other is the same as us. That's what their line. You have my favourite group are the pompous, ineffectual windbag civic nationalists who are constantly basically saying the solution is to pull our socks up until we reach the sky. If we pull our socks up hard enough, we'll get to a sufficient height and we can reform our way out of this. That won't work. It completely understands the reality of the situation. It's a kind of hallucination. This is not about self-confidence. It is not about assertion of our values. It's about incompatible populations. Now, there are two previous chapters to this Batley Grammar School protest. The first one was the Trojan Horse investigation in 2014. That was about school governors. And the second one was the 2019 Anderton Park school protests, again in Birmingham, 2 miles down the road from the Trojan Horse schools. That was about picketing outside the school gates to stop their children being taught about the equality of gays and lesbians, basically. Now, Trojan Horse, there was a lot of confusion about the Trojan Horse scandal. Disciplinary charges, I think there were 50 disciplinary charges, then that was reduced to 15, and then that was reduced to 1, most of them were dropped. Rumours of anonymous letters or forged letters being sent to the local authority. What it really was about was Muslim infiltration of school boards of governors in order to take over or to control the school that way. And again, it attracted all the people with different views about multiculturalism. People said it was about radicalisation and extremism being taught within the schools, which I don't think, there's not a lot of evidence that it was that. But if you are some liberal multiculturalist, if you are Gordon Brown, and you want to say everything's wonderful apart from terrorism, which we have to stamp out, then that's the hook that you look for, because then you can hang your case on that hook. But I don't think it was about that. There's another view is it was a conspiracy by hardline Muslims to foster an extreme Salafist point of view within those schools, i.e. Islam is fine, it's just a view of extremism, we don't want those extremist incompatible views being promulgated. Well, no, I don't think, there's not a lot of evidence that it was about that either. What it seems to me to have been about is an incompatible population, the Muslim population, wanting to get control over the schools in order to organise its own life, its own community life the way it wanted, which is incompatible with English society. And it was a coming to a head of those concerns. Muslim people saying, these are our children, this is our school, we want the school run our way. You pay for it, you give it to us, but it's ours. We control it. Now, this was put, the other way of looking at this is the way Samira Shackle, who wrote for The Guardian and put it in PC Guardian speak in her article, Trojan Horse, the real story behind the fake, quotes, Islamic plot to take over schools. And she said that the implicated teachers and governors have always denied that there was any conspiracy to, quotes, Islamise, whatever quote, why she puts that in scare quotes, I don't know, the schools, arguing that their intention was to increase community engagement and to raise attainment amongst disadvantaged Muslim children. Now that basically, increasing community engagement means increasing Muslim control. getting Muslim people to get involved in order to get control, to have influence, to get some kind of veto. Now, I don't know how you prevent that if you have a rapidly expanding Muslim school child population, as we have. You certainly don't just reform your way out of it with calls for cohesion. Now, the Trojan Horse scandal ended, well, it involved 4 major government investigations, and eventually it ended with more controls over the appointment of governors to schools in order to prevent such an attempted takeover again. That avenue, that little rivulet, was blocked off in order to stop the tide, which it was never going to do. It was never going to end there. It didn't end there. It came back again in Birmingham, 2 miles down the road, so 2 miles southwest down the road from the Trojan Horse schools, at Anderton Park School again in Birmingham. So Trojan Horse was about infiltrating school governors' boards. Anderton Park School was about taking over schools from the outside, or influencing schools from the outside by picketing outside the school gates. Now, the problem for schools was that they'd been put in an impossible position by PC governments who want to appeal to everyone, who want everyone's vote and don't really want to stand up for anything because they can't. They're not interested in that. Their job, they have power, they want more of it, and they get more of it by dividing us, by setting us against each other, and by also having a population without any sense of identity who feel ground down and who need protection from another group in society. That increases the power of politicians. So the politicians, they like the chaos that they are creating. It is in their interest. It gives them more power. Now, what they said, what the government had said, is that schools in their teaching must reflect the law, including the Equality Act. And the Equality Act involves quite a lot about sexual equality. And so what's funny about this case is that what the Muslims were protesting about was an award-winning program that had been designed by a local teacher. And this program was intended to teach children about the 9 protected characteristics of the Equality Act. Eventually, this was a local school authority trying to boast about its multicultural credentials. Look how keen we are to show you how equal you are to us. Look how well we think of you. And this instead acted as a rallying call for Muslim families in the Anderton Park area to protest against it, because they didn't want their children to be told that gay people were equal with their children. They didn't want their children being taught that. And what came out of that itself then seems to have been used as a vehicle for what is a common thread throughout these protests, and that is the aim to get control of the curriculum. If you watch some of the videos, the YouTube videos of protests outside the Anderton Park School, at some stage you will get one of the lead speakers getting up and effectively saying, "We want control of the curriculum. We want veto power." Now, it made some strange enemies and some strange bedfellows. Owen Jones came out saying it was a great thing because it was going to get people talking, get people debating, and that always ends up in greater unity. And so the result was going to be everyone's going to be happy, smiling, with more unity. Well, he was wrong there. He's been proved wrong now. Roger Goldsmith, the local MP, he came out immediately in favour of the Muslims. I reckon he'd been around a long time. He knew who was going to win. He knew which side he was going to join. And it eventually came to a stop, because although the government didn't intervene to help the school, the local authority eventually went to court and got an injunction to prevent the protesters protesting outside the school. So you can have your protests, your demos, anywhere you like, you just can't go within one street of the school. And the main guy who appears, or the fellow who appears to have been the main front man for the demonstrators, a man called Shakil Afsar, he then responded to that injunction by saying, "Our religious convictions do not permit us the luxury of cowering to the council and the court's attempt to silence us," basically saying, we're not going to go away. And he was right. It has now come back in the Batley School area. What happened was there was a concession was made after what the government did was, and this is another thread throughout these protests, is the government made it look like they had won the battle whilst behind the scenes working to lose the war. So you get the local authority is encouraged to go to court and get its injunction, which it gets. Protesters get sick of it because they can't send a lot of tough guys to picket outside the school gates and maybe intimidate some teachers, and they stop protesting. But what happened behind the scenes was the schools then were placed under a duty to consult parents about relationship education. And the headmistress of that school, she was quite upset about this, saying we're not getting the protection and the guidance from central government that we need in order to be able to hide behind it. And what she was saying is that local parents, I think she means Muslim parents, think that consult means dictate, that consultation means telling the school what to do. Well, of course it does. And government are not going to risk losing Muslim votes. So it's no surprise to me that it's flared up again, this time in Batley, with Muslims up in arms outside Batley Grammar School because supposedly a blasphemous picture of Muhammad was shown in a lesson about blasphemy against Muhammad. And some of the usual suspects are coming up, the usual civic nationalist suspects are coming up with their windy platitudes. There's James O'Brien going on talk radio saying that it's about consistency of teaching history. That the National Trust, they teach that some of our monuments were financed through the slave trade and that gets taught by the National Trust. Well, that's unpalatable, so Muslim people, they must learn the unpalatable history of blasphemy by being shown the cartoons that were put forward. So according to him, it's consistency of the teaching of history. No, it's the wrong answer. It's not about that. And Dr. Paul Stott of the Henry Jackson Society, he's come out with the usual verbiage, the usual boilerplate about cohesion around the values of liberal democracy. No, wrong answer again. It is not about the values of liberal democracy because Islam is not interested in the values of liberal democracy. Islam is in conflict with the values of liberal democracy. That's like saying that oil and water, it's about mixing oil and water smoothly. Then it's not going to mix. You also have the terror fetishists, or the people who say so. Everything's wonderful apart from the small problem of terrorism. They have what they're hanging their case on is the fact that this teacher and his family have apparently gone under police protection. I don't have any detail about that. I'm looking forward to Douglas Murray coming forward and saying that what we need to do is to shape up, get it together, mend our ways, turn over a new leaf and make progress pulling our socks up. And we certainly have made progress in pulling our socks up because we have pulled our socks up in the speed of surrender. In this latest Batley Grammar School case, before the first news report came out, the headmaster had issued a grovelling apology and the RE teacher had been suspended from the school. What the headmaster said in a video that I've seen described as being like a hostage video, he promised a full investigation. The school unequivocally, he said, unequivocally apologises for using a totally inappropriate image in a recent religious studies lesson. It should not have been used. A member of staff has also relayed their most sincere apologies. Well, he certainly goes in for superlatives when Muslims are on the other end, doesn't he? That headmaster. And I think we know who the member of staff was. I don't think it was a dinner lady. I don't think it was a caretaker. I think it was that RE teacher. That is begging and pleading. Please, Muslims, let us off the hook. He's learned the lesson from the previous case in Birmingham, the Anderton Park school case. He's learned the lesson of that. Central government is not going to intervene. It is not going to protect you. You had better apologise. You'd better effectively fire the teacher or appear to fire the teacher right away. And again, this common thread about getting control of the curriculum, that has appeared in this case. Protesters outside the school said, "We also use this opportunity to call upon the entire British Muslim community to review the materials being taught in their children's schools." I think we know what that means. And that means control. I think that means control over the curriculum. And they're calling for secondary picketing, flying pickets. What's quite interesting is that the flying pickets, the secondary picketing that the NUM did in the 1970s, that occurred in exactly this area, the Saltley area of Birmingham and up in Yorkshire. Again, that's what we're seeing here, calls for secondary picketing. Will there be secondary picketing outside other schools this time? There might be, I think, a 30 to 40% chance. So probably not, but you never know. Now, what is likely to happen? Well, I think these protests are likely to be got rid of this time, possibly through, again, another court injunction saying you can't protest outside the school, you've got to go 1 or 2 streets away. And the protesters might do that because you don't feel very manly and macho when you're shouting at a school from a distance of a couple of streets away. So that might get rid of the protest this time. So I think the immediate protest will, one way or another, be got rid of. I suspect the surrender, what will happen is surrender will be disguised as victory in that way. And the surrender part will be that the consultation procedure, where schools have to consult with parents about what's being taught about relationships, I think that will be formalised. Those consultation procedures will harden, probably by some euphemistic term like community cohesion educational guidance committees, something like that, where local people come along and say, you're not teaching our children that. So the battle will have been looked like it has been won, but the war will have been lost yet again. Now, I also think that these protests are going to get a lot more frequent. They are. It looks like they're becoming a lot more frequent. The first protests, you've had them actually repeatedly, right back from the days of the headmaster Hunniford in Bradford. I think that was in the early 80s, mid 80s. Because he said something Muslims didn't like, and he was hounded out completely unfairly. You've had it with various other schools, so it's been going on, but it's getting more and more frequent. Trojan Horse was in 2014. Anderton Park was in 2019, so that's 5 years. Now, 18 months later, the Batley Grammar School case, and I think the frequency will increase for another reason, and that's because of the demographic change at school age level. The Department of Education, it issues stats on the ethnicity of school children in state schools, and non-white British school children in state primary schools, i.e. I think the age 7 or 8 and above, it looks like they're on course from the government's figures to become 50% or more than 50% by about the mid-2030s. And I would have thought babies looks like becoming, non-white British babies, on that basis, looks like becoming a majority within this decade. So that is what happens with exponential change. Demographic change tends to be exponential. Exponential change happens very gradually at first. You don't notice it at first, and then suddenly with devastating speed towards the end. And that demographic change is accelerating. There's no way central government is going to do anything to risk alienating those voters. Also, central government likes the fact that it gives them more power by grinding us down, by dividing us. It puts more power into their hands. And the only thing that I think central government will do is to continue their policy of disguising defeat as victory. And schools, I think schools are going to get the message. They've already got the message, and that is surrender fast, backpedal quickly. Muslims already, and what that means is Muslims already have a veto over part of the curriculum. That is blasphemy. If something comes out and the Muslims think it is blasphemous, that teacher's going to get taken away. There'll be a big apology. It won't happen again. And the schools know that no one will protect them. They don't want this. They will surrender preemptively. You're going to get a lot of memos going around, a lot of RE departments in local education authorities saying, do not show a picture of Muhammad, whatever you do. We will not protect you if you do that. And most teachers are pathetically PC, or teachers who work in majority Muslim schools, they have to be pathetically PC in order to work there. They would probably die rather than be accused of racism. And government won't intervene. Eventually, what I think is the consultation procedures will formalise, and government will try and smooth over the process by just shelling out a lot of money to make sure that offending teachers go away without protesting, that they get transferred, or they leave the profession with a fat payoff just so they shut up about it. Now, if this goes on long enough, what I would then see happening, and this is long term, is those schools getting prayer rooms, because that veto, I think, will then turn into a positive prescriptive right for those local people or Muslim parents to say, this is what we want you to do within the school. This is what we want you to teach. This is what we want to happen. And I think one of the things they will ask for is a lot of money to build a nice, shiny, new meeting hall at the school. I think we know what they'll be used for in Muslim areas. Yes, you guessed it, they'll be used for prayers. And I can see local parents or local members of the local community being invited to use that nice, shiny, big, new school hall in order to say their prayers, perhaps under the guise of some euphemistic school community liaison meeting every Friday lunchtime. Now the question is that likely to happen? The question there is, what will happen first? That or the collapse of the system? I think the collapse of the system is likely to happen around the end of this decade. So I think it might happen with one or two schools. A nice shiny new hall gets used as a prayer room, and local people think of it as a mosque with a school attached, whereas our authorities, our government, still call it a school. Now, this kind of segregation and separation, I think it's for the best, given the rate of growth of foreign populations within England. What is happening is a symptom of those incompatible populations, and they're growing fast. I don't like that rate of growth, but given that it is going to happen, that politicians are going to encourage it because it gives them more power, I think that the best thing is for that self-separation, self-segregation to continue. Just to recap, I think the situation will resolve itself through the breakdown of the economy. And that breakdown of the economy, I think, will lead to a breakdown of the welfare state. I think the breakdown of the welfare state will lead to a breakdown of the state itself. And then when that happens, I think English populations will be forced to organise their own lives, and they'll be forced to vote with their feet, to gather and live only with each other. And they will say, I don't want to live with those non-English populations. It's nothing but trouble. It's a problem for us. And you will find then a much harder segregation or self-segregation between the populations. What you'll find then is the foreign populations, the non-English populations, will find themselves cut off from the English economy, cut off from the English welfare state, cut off from English employment opportunities and business opportunities. And their areas, those foreign areas, those self-segregated foreign areas, will plummet fast and become unlivable fast. And then at that stage, perhaps with a little bit of encouragement, those foreign populations will self-repatriate. It can be done reasonably peacefully, reasonably humanely. So that it is good. It is a good preparation for that if the populations are already self-segregating, separating themselves out, because it means that the solution it will make it a lot more easy, a lot more humane to solve the problem of incompatible populations. Now, the solution that what I fear is the solution that the Danish government appears to want, or said they want to put into place, and that is a decision to spread non-Western populations throughout the whole of the country. What they've said is that no area should have more than 30% of non-Western people in it. Basically, that can only be a temporary solution. What they're saying, what they're assuming, is that non-Western populations will never reach that 30% ceiling throughout Denmark. They'll never form more than 30% of the Danish population. But what they're going to do is to spread them out. That is a recipe for disaster, because when this situation comes to a head, it is then going to make it much more difficult, much more violent and bloody to separate out, for the populations to separate themselves out. So I favour Muslim populations carving out their enclaves in this way. I favour the grovelling surrender by headmasters and headmistresses. I don't have a lot of sympathy. What did they expect when they took a job in that area, in those schools? I favour unscrupulous governments just standing back, standing aside, and letting that separation and self-segregation build up, because I think it means that it will make it easier for us to win, and for us to win humanely.